Hey everybody, it's Bob Crossan, Senior Managing Editor of Water and Waste Digest. I am here today with Lauren Guy. He is CTO and founder of Utilis, and he is also one of our 2021 WWD Young Pros. Now, you've most certainly noticed by now that we've been doing these one-on-one video interviews with every young professional. This one with Lauren is actually the last one in the whole series, so check out the playlist in our description below, and you can also check out the article, which is also linked below. But for now, let's get into our conversation with Lauren. So, Lauren, thank you so much for being on the call. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
That's a pleasure. Yeah.
and of course, congratulations on being a 2021 WWD Young
Thank you.
Pro. That's really, really awesome that you're on
Thank you.
this list here.
Thank
Um,
you.
so I wanted to talk. I've been talking kind of each of these conversations. I start with career path to get an understanding of like how people moved through the industry, how they got interested in water, and that kind of a thing. Could you talk a little bit about your path in getting into the industry? And did you
Yeah.
ever think that you would be the founder of a multi-million dollar company like Utilis?
No. So that's a very interesting question because I do think I have quite an interesting path. So I'm a geologist. My bachelor degree is in geology. I
Hmm.
studied geology and hydrogeology, more precisely,
Hmm.
and in Israel. And then I went up to my master's, and my master's was more focusing on geophysics, meaning focusing on focusing on the let's start from the beginning. My focusing in the master education was focusing more on the physics of wavelengths and the atmosphere and so on and so on. So I wasn't really working toward water and all of those things. But during my studies, suddenly I was assigned to test if I can use the electromagnetic spectrum or microwaves or geophysicist ways to locate water on other planets like Mars. And because we cannot walk on Mars, we use geophysics. We use satellites with very special sensors like microwaves in order to find water, because if there is water on Mars, there are under the ground and we need to penetrate the ground. And the good thing about microwave that it enables us to penetrate the ground. So I was pushed toward the water industry. I was pushed into this industry, and I really liked what I work with on a daily basis. And actually, it's funny. When I finished my studies, I actually went to work on a very uncommon place for a geophysicist to work, which is a water utility. Uh, for many reasons, but I went to a water utility, and then I learned that the water industry is a great industry, but it has some shortcomings, and one of the shortcomings that I identified was water leakage. And then, I tied one and two and tied them together, and I thought we can start a company
Hmm.
to solve this issue. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it and the technology that you have is really cool. It's this super high tech thing of the satellites and finding leaks and using
yeah,
this data and all this very scientific things to make jobs easier for utilities. I noticed in your form you mentioned kind of overconfidence as being part of a lesson that you learned because you knew for certain this works and it like
yes.
it's used for these very specific purposes. It 100% works, but you ran into issues where people really doubted this technology. Could you explain how you overcame this overconfidence and how you communicated
Yeah.
the effectiveness of your technology?
So I was pretty sure in the beginning when I will show my solution to the world, everyone will just, take a bow and say, thank you for coming and helping us. But that wasn't the situation. People were accustomed to do the same thing that they were doing for the last 50 years. And implementing a new technology is not something that they waited for. They didn't wait for Utilis. They didn't wait for me to come and solve these issues. They had their solutions, very traditional, but they had their own solutions. And it was very hard to educate them that we can do the stuff that they are doing more efficiently. I didn't want it to change their day-to-day job. On their day-to-day job, they're just walking randomly in the streets, looking for leaks using acoustic devices. I'm not here to change that. I'm just here to tell them, listen, instead of just serving the entire city, You just need to walk into those very precise locations where I identify those locations from the satellite. Just go to those locations and look for the leaks there. You can use the same technologies that you are using, the same acoustic devices that you are using, but just survey those exact locations and not the entire city. And in the beginning, they looked at me like some kind of a charlatan coming from space and telling them where the leaks under the ground. They were very skeptic.
Mm-hmm.
But because we are backed with a very solid technology and a very proofed technology, it was very easy to show them the ROI and the benefits, and the doubt was easily replaced by a drive to solve this situation
Mm-hmm.
with the new technology. Yeah.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit about your first experience where it was like you showed you're like, hey, it did work. You mentioned this in your forum of like the look on their faces and how it just like it totally opened your eyes to like, oh wow, this could be a really big thing for a lot of other utilities too.
Yeah. So, Utilis found many leakages over the years. Right now, we found 40,000 leaks all around the world. But the first one is indeed the one that I will remember the most. It was here in Israel, in the local utility of Tel Aviv, which is a medium-sized city if you compare that to the US. And the utility agreed to check a place that I will give them. They agreed to take a part of this R&D. It was even before it was an officially a company. It was part of an R&D effort I wanted to test with them. And I told them, listen, on that very precise street and location, I think there's a leak. I know you have no indication there's a leak there, but please go out, dig this exact location, and find this leak as part of our joint venture. So they agreed that they sent a local crew to dig that location. And to that location came a very traditional crew, very old fashioned. And they looked at me and they said, there's no leak here. What am I doing here? And I told them with my space technology, and they look with me like a very skeptic face, there is a leak here and we want to find it. So because the utility obligated to help me, they digged. And on the first scoop, like they lift the ground, there was this smell of water that you can
Mm-hmm.
sometimes smell. And they looked at me and like, what just happened? And that was a great feeling to show that the technology works. And it really showed me that although this industry is very traditional, we can really hook them into our solution if we show them that it's working. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something too that's really interesting that pairs you weren't as explicit with it with some of the other young professionals who mentioned like the adoption of new technologies is really going to be a big thing for their generation and the younger ones. And
Yes.
yours wasn't so explicit in saying that. You kind of like told the story of I felt this from a personal perspective of
Yeah.
the conservative nature of adopting these technologies and the skepticism around them because you presented those new technologies. How do you see the industry moving forward with adopting those new technologies, and how important do you think that will be in the next 5, 10, 15 years?
So we do need to acknowledge that this is a very traditional market. If you're comparing that to
Hmm.
other markets in the high-tech industries or other industries, this is a very traditional market, and it will keep being a traditional market. It's supposed to be a traditional market, but you do see a shift of people retiring, old people retiring, and new people coming inside those organizations and those very young people they can absorb a lot of new ideas and they are coming with their own new ideas and they are open to new ideas. So we do find some utilities with a lot of young people in the decision making layers. Those utilities are very open to new solutions, and we do find that those utilities are more eager to work with us and to work with other technologies, by the way, not just us.
Hmm.
So I do think that although this will be still somewhat a traditional market, I do think that it will be more and more open to new technologies and to new innovations. And by the way, in more and more utilities, I see that there are innovations departments. So like 10 years ago, it was non-existent. And now you see more and more innovation departments in many utilities. So it shows that there is a drive to the right way.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just kind of moving a little bit, kind of shifting the needle on our discussion to more of like the personal side of things. In your form, you also mentioned we always ask about like hobbies and things that you like to do outside of work. And one of the things you mentioned was that you're a pianist and you do some lessons on the side of like teaching piano and whatnot. What are some things that you learned from playing and teaching piano that really blend or bring your like tie into your skill set with your work that you do? Is there transference of skills there that you find really interesting?
Yeah, so I think for a pianist, the most important thing is to never give up. You know, as a young kid, no one's want to learn in front of the piano for several hours.
Hmm.
So it's very easy to just give up. And I see that with my son now. He's 8, and it's very hard to convince them to sit in front of the piano or in front of a chess set or something else, and just to learn and to have fun. So I think that that the good thing about my personality that I see now is that I never give up. If someone closed the door, I just get from the window, and if it closed the window, I get from the roof. And I think it's really related to the way that I was taught as a child, is to never give up. And even if it's hard, and even if learning the piano is very, very hard, you just work, and eventually it will be very easy. And now it's easy, and now working in Utilis is more easy than before, because the market is more ready and the technology is becoming better and better. And I have a group of amazing people around me. We are now 60 people. 20 years ago, 5 years ago, I was alone. So it's become easier and easier. And this is just learning the piano, or learning any other set of a new hobby or something else.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really interesting that is a skill, really. I mean, I've not really thought of it that way, but that is a skill that you have to test yourself with of being resilient to barriers, being resilient to pushback, and knowing that like sometimes when there's pushback, you just have to push back harder.
Yeah, so I think resiliency is the exact word that I'm referring to. Just to don't feel bad, never feel bad. If even if someone just badmouth you and your technology and tell you to just go away, yes, it can feel quite bad sometimes, but don't feel bad. Just go to the next person, or just think about the next thing you want to achieve, or just go to your happy place, and just tomorrow is a new day, and never give up. And I think giving up in startups and giving up in anything in life, that's the main issue.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
not easy. It's not easy not to give up. But I give up also for a lot of times for many things. But the key thing is don't give up for the important stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard another way to express this is it's not fear. Instead of being fearful of the what ifs, like, oh, what if that conversation had gone better, being fearful of the what if this didn't happen? Like, what if I didn't take
So,
this
yeah.
action? So focus on just flipping that of like, I'm afraid to take this action because I don't know the outcome. Take the action anyway.
Yeah, so in hindsight, we are always the best people in hindsight. And when we are laying down in bed in the middle of the night, we just, I should have said that thing and that thing and that thing, and that's okay, because tomorrow
Yeah.
there's another day, and you learn from those experiences. So the next time you encounter the same situation, you know what to say, or you know how to react. So that's okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
especially for young people. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's a lot to learn in that regard. And speaking of young people, I wanted to get to our last question here, which I've asked every single young professional so far. We've got a a good variety of answers to this, but a lot of it has kind of had a theme to it as well. So I'm curious what your answer will be. But it's about workforce, and we know that there's a lot of retiring workers in the water industry. That we need this new pipeline of younger workers to fill in the gaps, or to be promoted into positions of buying and specifying all this new technology that companies like yours are bringing to the market. So the question really is like, how do we fill up that pipeline? So for my question to you is, how would you cater to and try to grab the interests of the next generation of water workers?
So you mean even even the younger people than us, the very
Yeah.
young people?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's very hard. By the way, my sons call me a plumber from space, because it sees me like a weird, innovative thing. But I do agree that the water market has a very bad stigma, or just it's not appealing to young people. There
Mhm.
are many other appealing things. So the only way to make it more appealing is to make everything more technological. To work with applications and to work with softwares and relying less on a certain individual and rely on technology. And I think that the utilities that are open for that and that they have innovations departments, in those utilities there are many young people and young people with a great education, not just anyone. So I do think that a utility needs to decide that it needs to be more technological and more open to the young generation and not just working as usual. And if you build it, they will come in the end. So you just need to build the foundations, and I think the technological generation will come.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's one of the common themes that I've noted from some of the other young professionals too. Of because of this trend toward emerging and newer technologies, those younger people, that's all they've ever known. So bringing them in with something that's familiar and something that excites them because it is familiar is a better use than saying, "Oh, we're going to do it the same way we did it 60
yeah.
years ago."
And I even say it now because Utilis is now working in the water industry, and I see in our company young people that are coming to work with us that usually went to other lines of work,
Hmm.
programmers and physicists and so on. And because Utilis is doing quite a cool thing, they're coming to work here in the water business and not just any other software company or something like that. So if you are laying the foundations of a very cool technology, people will want to come to work in those
Hmm.
industries. Yeah,
Yeah, and you noted something interesting there too of the variety of job titles that there are too. It's not just about being an operator or an engineer or a technician. It's
correct.
also doing things that you're talking about. Like you need these astrophysicists to work with these satellite things. You need the scientists, the geologists like you to design
And
them.
and
You need the
and the
marketing
data
people.
analyst. Yeah, everything. Yeah, everything.
Yeah, so you need all these different job titles. So I think that when people think about water, they don't think about all the variety of options that are available to them. You're not pigeonholed coming into this industry to be in one title or another. You can find a home for yourself with whatever skill set you can bring to the table generally.
Correct.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, thank you so much, Lauren. I appreciate you taking all this time and chatting with us and giving us a little background on Utilis and the challenges that you've had to overcome with bringing a new technology to the market. It's a very interesting thing, and it's very different from what a lot of our other young professionals have in terms of their experience. And speaking of all those other young professionals, you can read about all of them in the description. There's a link down below where you can read about every single one of them from our May issue of the Water and Waste Digest magazine. And you can also find our playlist of all the other young professional videos. This one with Lauren is actually the last one in this whole series, so make sure that you go back and you watch all the other ones to hear about all of their things. We have a very good spread of titles, like I had just mentioned, that there's people with all different types of backgrounds, so there's some really cool variety of experiences here, and we hope that you take the time to share them. And to Lauren, thank you again for taking this time with me to talk about your experience in the industry.
Thank you for having me.